Hello and welcome to our week of celebrating Indie Author Week UK in a series of videos that we call Wine and a Book.
Good evening and welcome to another in our series A Glass of Wine and a Book, in which we talk about the various books which we have either published ourselves or had published. So, cheers. It was in 1987 that I became freelance and started working for myself. There were four headings under which I thought I would work. The most important being ecological surveys for or against proposed development, such as major roads and things of that sort. It was very important to find out just the was there and where the areas of ecological importance were, and whether the development could actually go ahead. Secondly, I thought of writing. Thirdly, lecturing. And fourthly, great fun as it turned out to be, leading holidays related to natural history. And this led me, the last one, to write this book, which I call Is No Problem. You may ask about the title. Well, the reason it's called Is No Problem, because you can guarantee when you are leading abroad, possibly in a country where they don't speak your language, when the local person says, "Oh, do not worry, it's no problem," things are about to go totally pear-shaped. Anyway, it's about the problems we had, the joys we had, as we travelled around the world for natural history. And the first trip I did was to Mallorca. And I was given this trip by the late and great Dr. Francis Rose, who had been asked to do it. He'd never really been to Mallorca, but he knew that I'd been there twice and suggested that I do it. So I applied to do it and was accepted, and it went incredibly well. As a result of this, the organisation I was working for asked me where else I would like to go in the following years, and I thought not for terribly long, and a friend of mine had been to the southern Soviet Union, as it was then, to Uzbekistan, and said there were wonderful areas full of wild irises and tulips and fritillaries and all kinds of phenomenal plants. And I decided that this was where I wanted to go, so I did a lot of research into it, and in 1989 made my first visit to the Soviet Union. And I will read extracts from the book about this particular trip. Well, the day of reckoning had arrived, the day on which I would have to prove my mettle as a tour leader and botanical guru. I had seen Moscow and the wonders of Samarkand, even if, which heaven forbid, I couldn't hack it as a tour leader in this strange land, I reckon it had to have been worthwhile. We wandered along the path by a river. We noticed the scruffy remains of a marsh orchid in a little piece of bog, and the twisted and aborted flower of a red tulip. "That's Tulipa grigii," I announced confidently. One of the more experienced botanists in the party looked at it sceptically. "No, it isn't," he said, and proceeded to tell me why. I felt an embarrassed panic creeping like icy cold fingers up the back of my neck. my first attempt to identification, and I had fluffed it. We walked on in silence. With every step we took, I could sense the group's confidence in me waning. It wanted even more when suddenly we came to a barbed wire fence which seemed to prevent all further progress. "This must be new," I announced with a confidence I certainly didn't feel. "They must have put it up recently. I do hope it doesn't mean that we can't go on." "So do I," said a member of the group, somewhat testily. Once the group had negotiated the barbed wire, we started to climb up a grassy hillside. It was heavily grazed. There were no plants of any kind in flower anywhere. Had we got the season wrong? This was just awful. We must have walked about an hour in grim silence, the group's confidence in me diminishing with every step we took. At that moment, I wished I was anywhere but Central Asia, and felt very, very far from home. I felt very small and stupid. I made a silent curse of the friend who had given me such obvious inadequate instructions. Suddenly up ahead, I noticed an enormous member of the parsley family with flower heads at least 3 feet wide. The flowers were bright golden yellow. As we approached, there was a sudden great buzz as 1,000 insects were disturbed by our approach. Unfortunately, the group were not impressed. Very interesting," one muttered. "But we were promised tulips, irises. This is improved cow parsley. Where are they, Simon?" At least one member of the party was happy. John had asked my permission to go and sit on a hillside and drink in the poetry of the place. "You see, Simon, I'm not really a botanist," he explained. I told him he could go off on his own so long as he was back at the place where we had left the coach by 3 o'clock. I could just make out a ridge up ahead with a few scrubby bushes. The ground looked more disturbed. With very little confidence, I suggested we investigate. With resigned expressions on their faces, the rest of the group followed me. As I approached the ridge, I noticed a little clump of purple flowers on leek-like stems. I hardly dared to hope. As I got closer, I realized that this was Iris walliensis, a rare species noted from the Arancutan Gorge, which was where we were in the books, and one which I had certainly hoped to find. We walked up to it, and it was in perfect flower. "Iris walliensis," I announced with a triumphant flourish. While the photographers recorded it, the rest of us walked on a little while. The cattle pasture had given way to scree, which was covered like a rock garden in the most beautiful flowers. Iris walliensis was everywhere. To my utter delight, I find I could recognize more of the plant species there. They were in a book on bulbous plants, which, luckily for me, was written by an author who had visited just this part of Central Asia. As well as the iris, there were 2 species of tulip, one which was larger, with red flowers, than any example available from bulb nurseries, and here it was growing wild. There were fritillaries with wonderful sprays of delicate white flowers. This was Fritillaria bucarica, named after the fabled Central Asian city of Bokhara. The red tulip was Tulipa forsterana, while the smaller and much less frequent yellow one was Tulipa turkistanica. This latter is readily available in garden centres at home. There were winter aconites, pale and pink yellow anemones, and, on the edge of pockets of snow, golden crocuses suffused with brown dots forced their flower towards the sun. These were Crocus carolcoii and did not feature on any of the lists I had been given. Suddenly, out of an embryo disaster came a triumph. Suddenly, from being a leader in which the group seemed to have very little faith, I was becoming a hero. It was a wonderful feeling. We spent many happy hours botanizing this magical hillside. It turned out to be an area which had been completely unknown until I had stumbled on it. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that description. The next day we actually found the correct rusty iron gates which my friend had indicated that we should go through in order to find the place where we would find the flowers. It was nothing like as good as the area that we found the first day, and we felt very tired, and we found some very good birds, but nothing like the flowers we'd found on the previous day. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that, and cheers.